Hi, and welcome to Something to Talk About. Happy Valentine's Day for any of you who might celebrate it, and any of you who don't. Head over to your local favorite retail establishment tomorrow and buy some chocolate 50% off. So, thank you for tuning in. As you saw from our introduction, we're going to find out a little bit about who's on the ballot. What ballot, you ask? You'll find out in a moment. But first, we need to take care of a few little housekeeping rules. You are welcome to email me with a suggestion for a future topic if you would like. I can be reached at talk@bcattv.org. So feel free to shoot me a note, or you can always give BCAT a call anytime, day or night. They're good about stuff like that. I would like to thank the crew for this evening. We have John Vias, who is one of the staff members here, making sure that those of us who are here volunteering our time make sure that everything runs smoothly. So thank you, John. I also want to thank the crew for this evening, volunteer crew. We have Christina Nikitas, Gwyneth McNamee, Evan McNamee, and Lucian Gates. So thank you all for giving up your Wednesday evening to come hang out at BCAT and enjoy some cookies. Now, last but not least, I can't forget Daddy Date Night, and Daddy's going to have a quiet night with his feline friends because the kids are here. So now, my wonderful guest, whom might look a little familiar to you because she was my last guest as well, Amy Warfield. So thank you, Amy. I know I keep talking, but town clerk,
Yep.
making sure that all of our I's are dotted, T's are crossed. I always get that confused. For everything kind of administratively, which I learned the last time, not just about elections.
Yeah.
However, I love the socks. We are preparing for our next town election.
Yes, we are.
Even though it's only February now, the election's coming up April 6th.
Correct. Yep.
So, well, actually, before we get into that, quick little recap. Tell me about yourself, how you came to Burlington, and how did you end up in the town clerk's role?
Sure. Well, we moved to Burlington. My husband and I moved to Burlington in '83, and we raised our daughter here. I worked in a couple of industries, private industry. I worked mainly in computers and electronic publishing, that type of thing. And then in about 2004, 2005, there was an opening in the clerk's office. I knew Jane Chu, who was the previous clerk. I'd been involved with town government. Both my husband and I had been on town meeting. I'd been a library trustee, active in a couple committees.
All the civic
knew some of the ins and outs,
stuff.
And so she said, well, I'm looking for somebody who has a lot of computer experience, and she knew that I did. I, at that point, I had my own training business in printing and publishing.
Oh, cool.
And so training was changing, and I said, oh, yeah, let's look at something new. So I came to work for the clerk's office and helped her with implementing a number of computer systems and those types of things.
Now, did you have to research the systems, or did the town kind of say you will use this?
Well, pretty much the town had, they're Windows based, so we use Microsoft products and that type of thing. But then because I knew graphics software and that type of side, I brought those things along with me, and I was the first webmaster for the town.
Ooh,
and I still am the webmaster. And so, I brought some of those things that I knew from print and publishing and electronic publishing into those types of things. So yeah, it's been kind of a progression since 2005.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah.
I love happy stories. So, when did you take over as town clerk?
It's an elected position itself.
Okay. Are you up for re-election?
Not this year, no.
Okay.
So in 2011, when Jane retired, then I ran for clerk that time. And was elected and have been town clerk since then.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you are.
Oh, thank you.
Good
Yeah,
clerk.
so-
You know, you help my Girl Scouts, you help my Cub Scout. Love it.
Well, it's great. It just, the civic involvement is something I kind of grew up with. My father and mother were both very active in civic organizations.
Okay.
When I was in 4th grade, we moved to metropolitan Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
My dad is a military
can't really
officer. Yeah,
avoid
yeah,
politics and civic responsibilities there.
So you get involved with a lot of different things. One of the other things that I think taught me a lot about local government was that when I was in school, you had a year of civics education and government.
Okay.
And our teacher was actually a Virginia state legislator.
That is so cool.
So yeah, so he would come back from legislative sessions and say, "Here's what we were talking about. So how would you do this?" And kind of.
Oh,
so
neat.
we
Like
got
real life
hands-on,
experience.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I think that sparked my interest in it. We kiddingly say, actually, of my 3 siblings, 2 other of them have also been elected to positions. My sister is currently on a school committee in Upper Michigan, and so we've kind of always had that bent, that leaning.
So let's get into elections.
Yeah.
In order to participate in an election, you have to be a registered voter.
That's correct, yeah.
How does that happen? Because I know, like, when you apply for your license, they ask you, but what if you don't drive?
Yeah.
And what's that whole process
Well,
like?
in Massachusetts, with the latest Motor Voter Act, it's called.
Okay.
When you're 16, if you apply for a license, you get put into what's called pre-registration. So that puts you into the Massachusetts state system, and then when you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote, and you get a notification from my office saying you've turned 18. Congratulations!
Happy birthday!
And
Now show up.
And you're now registered to vote. Anyone else over the age of 18, if they go to the registry now, like you said, they're asked that question. Even if they've got just a mass ID, they're also asked that question.
Okay.
And that's where you do have to prove that you're a citizen so that you can then be registered to vote. But if you have somebody that doesn't have a need to go to the registry or whatever, they can either go online to the Secretary of State's website, or they can come into my office and fill out a paper form. So there's
With a birth certificate or something.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
exactly. There's multiple ways that you can register to vote, and it's just very simple. Again, anybody can go online, go in through the system, and fill out the form online, and then there's a check that's done based on your Social Security card and that type of stuff. So.
Because I'm also wondering, like, if you don't have a government issued ID,
Right.
And you come in with like other proof, whether it's a birth certificate or a passport or whatever, how do they know you're in Massachusetts? Is it like honor system?
Well, yeah, but basically one of the other things about Massachusetts is we're the only state in the nation that still does an annual census.
Oh,
so
okay.
our residence rolls are pretty
Kind
up
of-
to date. Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of do a
that's one of the
cross-reference.
things is we kind of say, okay, let's say you're saying you're living here. We have a family of the same last name. Tell us who those people are. Those type of thing.
Okay.
So we have some verification that is possible. And then people are signing the form under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Okay.
So that they're signing off that that's where they live and that yes they are a citizen and those types of
I'm
things.
telling the whole truth.
Yeah, exactly.
The truth,
Yeah.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
And then one of the checks that we deal with in terms of how do we make sure that somebody isn't registered in another state or something like that.
Like people who live in Florida during the winter and come.
Right.
Okay.
There's a couple of systems that are nationwide now that Massachusetts does. Our memberships have a subscription in, so that if somebody's name, birth date, those types of things show up, we are given notification that this person,
There might be a duplicate somewhere.
there might be a duplicate person. It is possible to have, same name, same birth date. There's only 365 days in a year.
That's true.
So it is possible, but those ones then we investigate.
Yeah.
And kind
the
of
occurrences
identify.
are rare.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but, we do some tracking down, what other business do they do in town? Do they have a dog? Do they have a business? Those types of things we check out to see, where they are. Because it even happens in Massachusetts sometimes, like you said, sometimes people are living even on the Cape for part of the year and then come back. So in Massachusetts, their voter registration, if they accidentally went to the registry, registered a car because they're living down in the Cape for a while. And so there's checks and balances in the system, yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Hence the need for computers.
Yes,
because I cannot imagine trying to do that manually.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be. So we do have we have an election coming up in April.
Yeah.
When is the last date to register as a voter?
Yeah.
For that April election?
For the April election, the last day to register to vote is on the 27th of March.
Oh, so it's like 1 week before the election?
About 10 days.
10 days, okay.
Yeah, that has changed. That has been a law that changed a couple of years ago. It used to be 21 days, but now it's 10 days.
Okay.
So they can come in and register to vote and do early voting at the same time.
I was going to ask, is there like a delay or anything?
There really isn't, again, because we have, usually if they come in to register to vote and we have early voting running, what we'll do is run a test to see whether they're registered somewhere else. And then we'll say to them, okay, well, we have you registered in another town. Do you wish to move that registration? And so that
so you
is
can
a
like
check and
instantly
balance.
move them from Woburn to Burlington.
And then take care of the problem.
Or Nebraska to Massachusetts.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
All right. Right before the show, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. Right before the show, you reminded me that this is a presidential election year.
Yeah.
And we have a primary.
Yeah.
When does that happen?
That's on March 5th.
Okay.
So we're about 3 weeks away from
crap.
today.
Okay.
And actually the deadline for that is February 24th for people to register.
Okay, so still that 10-day.
Right, 10 days always, yeah. So, and then we'll have early voting. We also have vote by mail, and those ballots have started to go out.
Okay.
And we'll start early voting around the 24th.
So with the vote by mail,
yeah.
How long does it take you to tally all those votes? Because my understanding is you can't start counting the mail-ins until after the polls close.
No.
No?
That's not
Oh,
correct.
okay.
No. We can now, again, another new law that came out in 2022 was that it does allow us to do what's called advanced processing. We don't have a count, but we use a machine now, and we had done it with the the tabulators that you see at the polls.
The ones that like suck it in upside down.
We have now, the Secretary of State's office actually did a grant, and we have now been able to purchase a high-speed scanner.
Oh, okay.
So what will happen is we will process those ballots that we have, and then that information is not printed out until after the polls close. So you can't have a count until after 8 p.m. on the day of the election.
Okay.
So
and is that 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., is that a Burlington thing? Is it a state thing? Is it a national thing?
Well, varies.
Okay.
The town sets the town election times, which we do 8 to 8. For a state election or a presidential, for a state election or the primaries, we have to open by 7 a.m. So we run 7 to 8. For the presidential, we can actually open any time before, or we can open any time after 5:45 a.m. So we do 6 a.m. So we have an extra 2 hours.
Well, that's kind of a random time, 5:45, but oh my gosh, getting
So, and one of the things that going forward, because you mentioned vote by mail, we the election in 2022, we had about 40% of our people do vote by mail.
really.
Yeah, so we may be able to back hours back to
7.
8 to 8 or something like that. Yeah, because more. It's interesting. The vote by mail and the early voting hasn't really increased participation, but it's made it easier for
Shifted.
Yeah, shifted. And so the same people that were voting all in one day are now voting across a longer period. But so maybe being open as the 12 or 14 hours is something that might change in the future.
Yeah, I cannot imagine getting up and being coherent enough at 6 a.m. to go cast an intelligent vote.
Well, for people who work, though, it may be a necessity, depending on if they have to go into Boston or something like that. So, but lots of options these days.
You had just mentioned that the number of participants in a particular election are pretty much the same. So why do we have either absentee or early voting, and are they two different?
They are handled two different ways.
Okay.
One of the situations is in Massachusetts, it's part of our state constitution that we have what is called absentee voting with an excuse. So you have one of 3 excuses. Either for religious reasons you can't go on that day, either you are physically going to be out of town on that day, or you have a medical or physical inability to get to the polls. So that's the 3 reasons. And people who used to vote, when we used to do absentee voting early, is that people had to sign a document, again under the pains and penalties of perjury, that they were going to be out of town, physically not able to whatever. So they had to sign that. Early in-person voting eliminated the need, and it's what a lot of other states have always had as no excuse absentee.
Oh, okay.
Now, when they first did it, they did put some other restrictions into early voting in person. They basically now made them very equivalent. The only one difference is early in-person voting has to stop a day before the last day, or I should say 2 days before the election date.
Oh, okay.
So, like with the town election, which is on a Saturday, the last day they can do early voting in person is Thursday, right? But absentee voting could be done the next day until noontime. So it's just, it gives people another half day if, let's say, somebody's going on, all of a sudden has a business trip. And they've got to leave.
Or family emergency.
Right, emergency, something like that, yeah. So that's kind of the difference.
Kind of curious why that 24-hour window is.
I think the major reason, I think, is that it gives us time to properly process and get the mechanics of an election is the other side of all of this. And then just like with vote by mail, vote by mail, you have it's 5 business days before the election is the last day you can request a vote by mail ballot. Why? Because we've got to have enough time to get the application in and get it mailed out, and hopefully you get a chance to get it back. Because you're not supposed to show up, well, you cannot bring your vote by mail ballot to the day of the election and cast it. If
on that note.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, keep going, because I totally forgot.
So basically, when you have a ballot that you requested vote by mail, you need to return it to the clerk's office. Okay.
Not to the polling
Not to the
location.
polls. If you show up at the polls, we do usually give people the option about, we will take that ballot and reject it, and you can vote a new ballot a day of ballot, Because the whole thing is you got to vote by mail ballot because you wanted to vote in
By
the
mail.
comfort of your own home, not come to the election.
I remember my question.
Yeah.
What kind of system of checks and balances prevents somebody from requesting a mail-in ballot, mailing it in, and then also showing up at the polls and say, oh, I want to vote, because
Right.
now they have theoretically 2 votes.
Yeah. Well, one of the nice things, new pieces of equipment that we have implemented in are we have a product that are called poll pads. They're basically an OEM iPad
Okay.
device that what we do is every day early voting is going on, we upload into those devices the accurate information for the night of
Okay.
or night before, and when someone comes to the day of the election, this is another reason why we have early voting ending a day before, is that we have time to get that information
Okay.
inputted, uploaded, and then when if somebody does come to the polls, what will happen is one of 3 things. Either they'll give their name and address, and we'll say, yep, okay, you can have a ballot, check you in. Or they'll say, oh, well, you've already voted. We
Okay.
have received your ballot.
Okay.
And sometimes they say, well, no, I didn't do that. Then we call back to the office and we have some
Then
legwork to
you
do.
know, then your
Yeah.
poll workers come and say, Amy, coming out. Okay.
And then the other thing is that it will also show that they had requested a ballot but not returned it.
Okay.
And in that case, then
Because we know how reliable the U.S. Postal Service can be.
Yeah. So in that case, then what happens is we say, okay, you can have a ballot now because you did not return the other ballot. We do, the other check on that is even if they had stopped by the office and dropped the ballot there the day of the election,
Okay.
and then come to the high school and voted, what would happen is that ballot they dropped off at the office would eventually come to the polls. And then again, it would say, wait a minute, this person has already voted.
Okay. So
They
when
voted in person. And so what then happens is that whatever ballot you first vote is the one that's counted. So if somebody accidentally tries that, we mark that second ballot as rejected.
So
and
the
it
second
gets
ballot
no.
would be the in-person one because
No, the second ballot would be the one that they dropped off
the
at
mail.
yeah,
Okay.
So. And so, so there's those checks and balances in the system
Okay.
all the way along the route in terms of, what are people getting confused with?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just, you remember the last presidential election. Okay, not here, but we've heard about, oh, my father passed away last week, but we still had his absentee ballot, so we're going to fill that out
Right.
under his name
Right.
and then still cast our own vote. So,
One of the nice checks about that, for us at least, is because, again, of having this statewide system, the legality of it in Massachusetts is if we know the person has already passed away, we cannot count that ballot.
okay.
And again, because if somebody passes away in Burlington, I have those
You
records,
know.
we know
Yeah.
that. Or if they pass away in another city or town in Massachusetts, that we're alerted to those things. So, it can be caught. I mean, there could be a situation where, somebody
timing
dies on
could-
Friday,
Yeah.
we don't find out, but then that ballot would have been cast, and that's
Okay.
what we would work under.
Got it. Oh my gosh. That
Yeah.
sounds complicated because how many, we have like, wait, Burlington's 35,000?
No, we're 26,897, I think was the last count when I
Okay,
just
somebody else
downloaded.
is going to have a birthday, so then it'll be 98. So,
Yeah, exactly.
well, not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, that's a lot of
Yeah.
potential.
Yeah. Well, and we have about almost 18,000 registered voters.
Oh, okay. Early voting is available, or early and or absentee. Is that for all elections, or is it just certain?
Well, The state, it's required for any state election. So your
Okay.
presidential primary, state primary, presidential state election in November. I have decided that it just makes sense to keep it the same even for a town election.
Eliminate that element
Eliminate
of
that confusion about,
Oh,
well,
okay.
why last time for an election I was able to get a ballot mailed to me, and this time you're saying, no, it's got to be an absent, I think, those are the things that only help to confuse voters.
Okay.
And so it's just, the more we can be consistent with what the procedures are and what the policy is for the town. And that's something that I actually go to the selectmen every year and say, okay, this is my idea, this is what I think we should do. We should have early voting and vote by mail for the town election as well as the other 3 elections this year. And they've voted on that and agreed with me so far.
Cool.
Yeah.
Why, jumping ahead to, why April 6th for the town election?
Well, part of it is our bylaw. Our bylaws require that we have the election in early April, or as close to the beginning of April as possible, depending on holidays and school vacations. So I sit down with a calendar and I say, okay, so when are all the spring holidays? And
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And we have had it as late as like the 20th.
Really?
A couple times when things were, just
The stars aligned, yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
depending on when, all of the spring holidays were. But that's pretty much kind of, and then again, that's another process that what I do is we vote on, we have a board of registrars that I work with. The registrars say, yeah, that looks good. We take that to the select board and the select board approves the date. And then they agree with the date, I should say. And then what we do is we take it to town meeting and it's voted on in the September town meeting.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question is how far in advance do you, and town elections are every year?
Yep, town elections are every spring.
Shows how much I paid. I'm in a time warp. So, I think it took me like 10 years and an extensive conversation with you before I realized that kids can vote only in town elections.
Yeah. So that's another thing that actually Jane instituted it. We've been doing it for about probably 30 years now.
Okay.
Is that we call it student vote.
Okay.
And what it is because that's the ballot that we print.
Oh,
The other ballots are printed by the state.
Okay.
So they wouldn't want to have to make a special ballot for that. Okay. So the student vote ballot is basically all of the
Town position.
the town-wide positions. Doesn't include town meeting because town meeting positions are by precinct.
Yes. Okay.
So we do student vote is all the town-wide.
Town-wide.
And we have in the past we've tried to put questions on and that type of stuff. So sometimes
Are
we'll
there
just make
questions
up
on the town election?
well, there can be,
Oh,
but
okay.
we put it like for the student vote, we put a special question.
Okay.
We've asked in the past, which class do you like best, which, that type of thing. So anybody who is under the age of 18 that would like to get a chance to vote and see what the voting process is like,
Okay.
we have a tabulator just like the parents, the adults use.
So you do you count those
Oh
votes?
yeah, all of those ballots are, and it's always on the, if you look at the town results page on the website, the student vote totals are there.
Cool, because somebody asked me, I'm like, I think they do, just to kind of
Oh
compare,
yeah. No, it's a real we test the
I
machine
love
the same way that I
it.
do all the other machines and everything.
Now, I think the last time the student ballot was a different color.
They always are. That's the way we can identify what they
Okay,
are.
without having to like look to see, is there a precinct on here?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Speaking of precincts,
Yep.
how are precincts determined?
Okay.
Is it population?
Yep.
And
Actually, it comes from federal law.
oh, okay.
A precinct, precincts cannot have more than 4,000 residents in them. So that's what kind of drives how many precincts
Okay.
you have. Because we're less than 28,000, we have 7 precincts.
Okay. But we have more than 24, if
yeah.
I'm doing the math right.
Right,
So,
exactly.
Because we just you, or the town just added precinct 7.
That was done in 2010.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So-
Okay, now I feel really old. I'm like, oh, just a couple of years ago.
2020, we stayed under the 28,000, so we are still at 7 precincts, and so then it isn't driven by voters. It's driven by residents. So that's where we have, some precincts are very large because you've got a big distribution of single-family homes, that type of stuff, where the population is denser, like in precinct 2, it's a smaller geographic area. So they're not.
Because I'm also thinking, like over by 3rd Ave, there aren't a lot of residents there.
So that
it would
stretches. That's why precinct 7 kind of stretches all the way down Middlesex Turnpike and inside of 128 and that type of stuff.
I just know I'm precinct 5. I don't know what any of the other precincts are.
Yeah.
And the only way I remember that is my house number is 5.
Oh, there you go.
So I only have one number to remember.
There you go. That's good. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what drives them. And that's done when the federal census is done every 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we had mentioned earlier that the Burlington town census is annually. So you have to wait every 10 years. Do you think it's going to change in 20?
Well, it's really very interesting. We have not exponentially gone up in population since the 1980s.
Okay.
In the 1950s, we had about 3,500 residents.
Okay.
In the 60s, it jumped up to about 12,000.
Wow.
In the 70s, it jumped up to 21,000. And we've kind of bounced around over the last 70 years, 50 years.
Wait, we're in the 70s, so,
70, yeah. So over the last 50 years, it's really just kind of bounced around between that 21,000 number up to 27. We've been up to 27, kind of in that cycle. So I don't know if exponentially, if we might go over 28, depending on some of the initiatives that with the MBTA initiative and looking at the Mall Road redesign stuff.
And I'm also thinking there just seems to be houses popping up everywhere too.
Yeah.
So would there ever be an occasion to decrease the number?
Yep.
So if our population does fall?
There are. Well, that's a tricky thing. A lot of towns find if their population does drop, you can stay at that number.
Okay.
There's nothing. There are. I think Arlington has like 21 precincts, but
Wow.
doesn't mean that they have 100,000 people. So I think what happens is once you get some precincts.
You don't want to have to redraw them.
Yeah, I mean, it's
and
like,
then,
okay, well,
10 years
as
later.
long as they're staying, so you don't want to flip around too much.
Yeah.
Especially, too, for us, since town meeting membership is driven by precincts. So we try to, redesign, when we have to redraw the lines, keep it as simple as possible.
Okay.
So we're not making major shifts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm just looking at my notes. Okay. The title of this episode was Who's on the Ballot? How is that determined?
Well, that is determined by the terms that are involved with the different offices.
Okay.
And everyone who is elected to a term, if their term is expiring, they're given the option to whether they want to rerun or whether new people are coming in. And that this year it's kind of getting exciting.
Yeah.
We have 2 people running for moderator. We have 3 people running, and that's a one person position. We have 3 people running for 2 spots on select board.
Okay.
We have 2 people running for 1 spot on school committee.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so it's
wow.
really, we have a lot of, and there's a lot of new people that are showing interest and coming forward and willing to,
What do you think
run.
that's changing though? Is it, do you think it's, I know you've worked a lot at the local level, meaning local as in just within Burlington.
Yeah.
with the recent Civic Expo, but do you also think what's happening at the national level is impacting?
Yeah,
at all?
I think that people are really starting to look at, well, what does government do, and what does it do for me, and what, again, to voice President Kennedy, what can I do for government? What is my responsibility? So I think that people are understanding that, yeah, if I don't vote, I don't have a right to complain. If I want to complain, I maybe need to be part of the solution. So I think that in general is just getting more and more people going. On the federal level, in the Congress, they've had a lot of new membership. I think that's what's happening locally, is that people are saying, I've got some good ideas.
I'm
I
not
could get
happy.
involved.
I want to see progress.
Yeah, or just again, how can I get involved? Whether it's dissatisfaction or just how can I get involved?
Okay.
And
I want to make a difference.
I want to make a difference. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, when I talk to local people or even talk with different people looking at running at the state level, they're like, yeah, I want to get involved. I want to make a difference. How do I do that? I want to do more than just voting. I want to do something.
So if I wanted to do more than just vote, it just sounds so insignificant, just vote, but if I wanted to run for a position, how would I go about doing that?
Well, unfortunately, today is the deadline for taking out papers.
Okay, but there's always going to be another election.
Oh, yeah, there's always an election next year. Basically, what you do is you start with coming out and getting your papers. Okay? So that's basically saying, I want to run, I'm going to accept the nomination to be able to run, have my name put on the ballot. And for townwide offices, that requires 50 signatures from registered voters.
Okay, so that would be like a select board position or school committee position.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And then
how many? 50?
50, yeah.
Okay.
And so what they do is they are given 4 sheets of nomination papers, and they can go get signatures for those. We do, when they bring them back in, we verify the signature, and we make sure the person that signed it is a voter, and then we
make sure that the person's not there several times.
Correct, yeah. Make sure that they only signed 1 piece of paper. And then once those are certified, then that's what gets your name on the ballot.
Okay.
With the town meeting position, which is a precinct position, then they only need to have 10 signatures, and the same process. We verify that those people are in your precinct and that they're a registered voter, and after you've got that, if you've got the right number, then, or enough, at least 10, then your name would be put on the ballot.
Okay.
The only nuance with that is we have a bylaw that if you're a current seated town meeting member, all you have to do is sign your acceptance of running.
So you don't need an additional 10 signatures.
10 signatures, yeah.
But what about for like the townwide?
You always have to get
the 50.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what is the maximum time allowed for that? So how are the dates determined to say, hey, town hall, hey, Amy's office, I want to run for this position?
It's a 60-day process. So basically, the way ours usually falls is that it has to be a minimum of 60 days. We usually start at the first business day of the year, so January 2nd. You can come in, take out papers, and then there's a schedule that says, okay, you've got this many days to be able to get signatures. Like I said, today, the 14th was the last day to pick up papers. People have until the 16th, Friday, to bring those papers back to the office.
And that date of this February 16th is 60 days before?
No, it's not. That day is not 60 days before.
It's the 60 days from when you open to,
Exactly, yeah. And so there are a number of people, if you look on the website, there are a number of people that still haven't returned their papers. We are anxiously awaiting to get them back.
Because we need to print that ballot.
That's right. So what will happen then is after the date to return papers closes, theoretically we have 5 days to make sure we check all the papers and everything like that.
5 business days or 5 days?
5 business days.
Okay.
And so then what will happen is I then send it to the printer. We go back and forth, make sure it's proofed and correct,
Everybody's
and
spelled
everybody's
correctly. What's the order? Is it like alphabetical or is it by?
Inside of a race is alphabetical. Yeah.
Okay.
We have through our bylaw we have a set which one, what position on the ballot it is.
Okay.
But people's names are put in first alphabetically by incumbent, and secondly by anybody who's a new person.
So the
running.
incumbent is first, and then newbies underneath.
Yeah.
But within those sections, it's alphabet. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the way. That's the way the structure is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What am I'm forgetting. Okay. Questions on the ballot.
Yeah.
So on like state is like, okay, do we want to make marijuana legal?
Right.
Do we ever have like town questions? Like, do you think the library should be open on Tuesdays? Or?
Yeah. Well, the selectmen control. Well, they have say.
I'm just making up the whole library thing.
No, you're right. We could put a ballot question on a town ballot. Okay. It can be anything. Some towns have. That's how they put on like a Prop 2.5 question or a debt exclusion question. That can go on a town ballot. It can also go on some of the state ballots. So what happens is there's 2 parts with the questions. If somebody wants to do a statewide question, then what happens is there's a process where they go to the Attorney General's office and submit, we'd like to put a question on. The Attorney General's office just determines whether it's a legal question, whether...
Yeah, that's kind of important.
Yeah. And so they go through a cycle then of getting signatures, and that may be why, like at grocery stores...
Yeah, like Billerica's, they have something about their town center or something.
Yeah, now that's a local question for Billerica, and they're having a special election on Saturday for that.
Oh, so it's not part of their town.
It's not part of their town election.
Okay.
So and that's another thing is that you can also run special elections.
Okay.
Which
well, let's finish the questions first, and then we'll talk about.
The state question issue, you would then have the Attorney General would verify all those signatures or re-verify them and send the data to the Attorney General. Then they determine what questions can be on the state ballot, which is what is the November ballot.
Okay.
And so then they run another cycle of signatures required to put it onto the ballot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's quite a process for people who are trying to get a statewide question, like the marijuana question was one, you know.
I think one year there was one about, the smiley face license plates or something.
Exactly. And so so the other piece of it is the town could also request the Secretary of State to put a question on the November ballot. But that has a very long lead time, like you have to get it into the Secretary of State on August 1st to be able to be considered for it. But then that would be something that they would print on just the Burlington ballots. We did one of those once back with Citizens United. Which was a campaign, and whether we wanted to support that, and so yeah, those kinds of things can happen. And then the secondary thing is, yes, if there was an issue that came up for the town, and the selectmen decided that we really need to vote on this before waiting for the town election the next April or whatever. They could call a special election. And that's what they're doing in Billerica.
Okay. Now, you don't have to tell me what's going on in Billerica because we don't live in Billerica.
Right. But Burlington, we may come down to having a special election if they decide to do a debt exclusion for the schools.
Okay.
So that would be a reason that we might have a special election. We can run a special election concurrently with a state election, but that's just all logistics.
Okay. Back to who's running
Yeah.
and
Oh,
filling
yeah.
out papers and everything. Um, is there a way in advance for someone like me who is not running for anything to log onto the town website and kind of see what's going to be on the ballot? Or do
Yeah.
I have to wait to get the postcards in the mail from all the candidates?
No, actually, on our website, in the Burlington, we have an area that's called Burlington News. We always have election information. About twice a week, I update it with who's taken out
has-
papers,
oh, okay.
who has returned papers,
Oh, so
contact information for them
okay.
if you wanted to reach out to them and say, what do you stand, what is your
Okay.
take on this, those types of things. So yeah, there are ways that list is there. Unfortunately, fortunately, whatever, we can't put out campaign material for a candidate. There's state laws that restrict.
well, because you have to be objective.
Right, exactly. So, because a lot of times we'll get people a call and say, well, why don't you have a biography of this candidate? And I'm like, well, we can't do that because that would be using municipal resources for campaign purposes.
Okay.
That's why a candidate needs to get themselves out there. They need
Okay.
to do signs. They need to use, participate in BCAT's candidate
Right, their forums and
debates
debates.
and that kind of stuff.
So
you know,
they're responsible for printing their own lawn signs and postcards. And
how are they going to communicate?
how do
to
they
people?
pay for all of that? Is it out of their pocket?
Well, some people do raise funds from
that's true.
friends and that kind of stuff. There are people who say, yeah,
They hold a bake sale. No,
that's right.
Well, maybe they do.
I agree with you. I like what you say about this particular topic, and so I'm going to donate to your campaign.
Okay.
And so those people are then required to do reports on how much they've earned and that type of stuff.
Okay, and how they spend the money,
That's
because
right.
yes, we know in federal, it's, yeah.
Yeah, there is a whole office.
Can't buy a
there's
new
an
car
office
with
of
you.
campaign finance at the state that we have to send all these reports to and everything like
Okay.
that.
So you don't, your office doesn't necessarily run the reports, but you have to gather the
Yeah,
information.
they basically candidates are required to submit 3 reports during the campaign season, and we then put those up on the website. Make sure they get to the Office of Campaign Finance.
And how does, it seems like there are a lot more contested races this year. How does that compare to like prior years? Is there like an ebb and flow where sometimes everybody runs and then other times when nobody runs, or do you think it's like a steady increase like we talked about people wanting to become more involved?
I think there's an ebb and flow, because if things are running pretty well, if there's no controversial issues in a particular area in town, people may just be satisfied. It's when, whatever, there are a number of things that motivate people, and then they get involved.
Okay. And I'm looking down at my notes. Recently, okay, within the last 20 years is recent, how does the town, or is it the town that determines what is an elected position versus what is an appointed position? Because I think, was it the town treasurer
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
switched
Yeah.
relatively recently?
Yeah.
How often does that happen, and how is it determined?
Well, it can happen any number of times. It really is kind of driven about, what the needs of the town might be. I mean, Burlington has certainly gone through a very large kind of economically changing era time, in terms of those types of things. So I think that sometimes, the concern is that in certain areas you might need to have somebody that has experience or training in those areas.
It's like a specialty.
A specialty
thing.
kind, and just, that will become apparent that maybe we need somebody with a little bit more expertise in an area than what might happen if somebody's just elected.
Okay.
Not that, again, being elected, I think that elected people can be as passionate and as good as someone trained in that
Yeah,
area.
okay.
So it's kind of
But you want to find that balance between qualified versus popular.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and that is one of the questions that people do run into. I mean, Burlington has even talked about, maybe they looked at the government. They had a government study committee a few years ago, and said, do we maybe even need to look at being a city and going to a city form of government?
Oh, yeah. How would that be determined?
Well, that would be determined by creating a charter committee and determining that we're going to change and have a charter, and that the charter is going to say we're going to have, a city council instead of, and actually Framingham did that within the past 10 years.
Is it a population impact, or is it just?
It's the style of government.
Okay.
You would eliminate things like town meeting. You would have a larger city council. The city
But you'd have a mayor
and you'd
instead
have
of a
a
select
mayor
board.
and that kind of
Okay.
stuff. So yeah, it's a style of government as opposed to population.
Okay. Well, I knew it was a different style, but I wasn't sure if towns had to reach a certain threshold before. Do we want to change? So you could have a ginormous town, and you could have a little tiny city.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We had mentioned, elected versus appointed and qualifications involved. How would someone know in any particular position, what qualifications are necessary?
Well,
Is there like a job description somewhere?
yeah, there are job descriptions, and they're actually those are found for any elected position. The job description's found in the bylaws in terms of what that position entails and what that position has responsibility for.
Okay.
Outside of being able to run, you have to be 18 years old. There's not an age minimum.
Okay, so like the president has to be 35.
Yeah,
35?
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, in local elections, you have to be a registered voter, and you have to be
qualified
you have to be able
to
to vote
vote.
for yourself. Yeah, and so yeah, that's really kind of the minimum. And then what are the functions of the job? And that's a lot of times people will come in and say, I want to run for this position.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What does it do? And I'm like, well, it's involved with this and that. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that that's what it did.
Yeah.
I just thought I got to pick cool park things or something.
Right, because I was thinking like school committee. Oh, okay, I make decisions about the school when school. But I think not too long ago, it's like where to put the handicap parking spots is a school committee thing, and I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
Or it was something related to that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and that's one of the things is realize, and it's a hard thing to understand sometimes, is like, what is really under my purview? What am I responsible for doing?
Right.
School committee, for instance, I'm not responsible for driving the buses and getting the children to school. That's not what school committee does.
Okay.
School committee might negotiate a contract for a bus company to drive the kids to school. So, but for that's kind of an extreme example, but that's what you have to say. What is really my purview? What am I really responsible for?
Because I'm also thinking personal bias may come in to play.
Yeah. And
like, I want to run for school committee because my kids go to Fox Hill, and Fox Hill is really buzzing right now.
Yeah, and that's a very good kind of example, is that, again, you've got to understand when you're in an elected town-wide position, your responsibility becomes to the community. And again, whatever office you run for, what is that position responsible for doing, and how am I going to better the community by my actions?
Right.
You know, there's a term that's used in sociology called the tragedy of the commons, and
Oh,
it deals
okay.
with the common. And the fact is that, you know, when when everybody used to bring their animals to graze at the common, if you overuse the common
Okay.
with your animals,
So if my goats eat too much grass.
exactly, that meant that somebody else's animals were not going to be able to be fed.
Okay.
So the tragedy of the commons is when people start to only worry about their needs
Okay.
instead of looking at the greater needs of the community.
Okay.
So it's what.
So which is why the voters need to do their research and figure out sometimes the motivation behind a particular candidate.
Yeah. And you might vote for a candidate because you agree with them on what their policy or their outlook is for the
Okay.
entirety. It's a very, you know, I mean, it's what makes democracy complicated. It's not just voting for my favorite friend.
Well, you could, but yeah, you want to give it a little more thought.
Yeah.
Okay. We only have a couple minutes left and I have a bunch more questions. How can we encourage more involvement in local politics?
Well,
So either voting or running or both.
Yeah, I think that is a very difficult question because we can only try to work to get as many people involved as possible. I think that there's, like we've said, there's been a big influx in the number of people running, but there's also a lot of other places that people could get involved with boards and committees.
Okay.
That sometimes those groups, you know, we can't get enough people to be on them, and so they can't do the job of advising or finding out information that then feeds into these elected offices.
Okay.
So that's another thing that, you know, I really encourage people to try to get involved in. That's one you mentioned, the Civic Expo. Just getting, you know, that was a wonderful event with just getting all the departments in there, and people could come through and find out and ask. I mean, we probably had the worst problem we had is that we didn't have a big enough space. So next year we're going to be doing it.
No, yeah, exactly.
That's not a bad problem to have.
If that's the only problem, yeah.
So, you know, looking at what bigger space we can use and making it bigger and better next year.
Because I'm also thinking, you know, what you had said about, you know, committees that require citizen participation. How would somebody find out? Because recently, wasn't there like a committee forming for the new police station? Maybe?
Yeah. The
and they were trying to find people from different aspects of the community to have a fair and equal representation. So how would somebody find out about that?
Well, the best thing I can say is that they can always call the clerk's office. We're very glad to direct them to the right place. But the selectman's office, the select board's office is also the place that kind of a lot of that stuff runs out of, because most of those positions, committees and stuff, are appointed by the select board. So yeah, they can, you know, if they can't remember the select board, come to the clerk's office. We'll be glad to direct you and help you find the right place.
Excellent. And we are out of time. So thank you so much.
Well,
wow,
thank you.
Twice in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Impressive, which is great because the last time it was 2016. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to the election in April. Not so much the primary. I'm like the pre-something primary. But thank you so much.
Well,
and I also want to thank everyone at home for tuning in. And I hope you are a little bit more motivated to get involved and find out how you can make a difference in Burlington. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you around town. Good night.